Today on Retire with Purpose, what it means to leave a breadcrumb legacy, navigating the retirement minefield, and the latest in retirement trends.
Welcome to Retire with Purpose, a show specifically designed to help you maximize your financial confidence in retirement. Casey Weed is the CEO and Chief Visionary of Howard Bailey Financial, a certified financial planner and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He's your host on Retire with Purpose.
If you're heading into retirement or it's just around the corner, you are in the right place today because we're going to talk about your second act. I'm Lee Kelso here with Casey Weed, certified financial planner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. He also is the host of a very popular retirement and financial podcast called the Retire with Purpose podcast. And that's where he met Jan Freed, who specializes in helping people through leadership challenges, but also retirement second act.
Yeah, Dr. Jan Freed is now a leadership development coach in her second act, and she's coaching largely business leaders. So if you're a business leader, a CEO, an entrepreneur, those are quite often the individuals that tend to have the biggest struggle when transitioning into retirement. And there's a lot of coaches out there today, believe it or not, that are helping individuals like you transition into retirement. And Dr. Jan Freed is one of those individuals that specializes in these transitions. She is also an expert in conscious aging and just simply creating a vision for life beyond work, not to mention one of the reasons that I invited her on. And the thing that caught my eye was this concept about leaving a legacy she calls a breadcrumb legacy. So I'm going to go ahead and let her explain to you what a breadcrumb legacy is.
And in the workshops, we talk about meaning and purpose. We talk about legacy work. And it's the legacy part that I think has added the most value because most people don't think about legacy. So what I do in workshops, Casey, is I ask people, when do we leave a legacy? And people will say, well, when we leave. And I say, okay, well, what do you mean? Well, when we leave a career, when we retire, when we leave a position, when we die, okay? And I say, okay, well, what about when we leave the earth? Or when we leave the room, we leave the meeting, we leave the interaction. I'm leaving. So I created this concept called breadcrumb legacy, and I'm leaving some breadcrumbs with your audience today.
Right.
Okay. So they're going to be thinking something about me based on our conversation.
I love that concept. I'm leaving a legacy for my children right now and on this earth. You know, as you watch this, you are leaving a legacy. We're constantly dropping these little breadcrumbs, and that's the legacy that we're leaving. And that's where I think a lot of financial planners get it wrong. They talk about legacy as if it doesn't happen for 20 or 30 years, but it's happening in your life right now. And one of those things that can help you elevate your legacy could be retirement, or it could be to continue to work for that matter. And Jan talks to us here about how to make that decision on when to retire.
Well, one of the things that I often say, Casey, is if you really like what you're doing and you can continue doing it, then there's no reason to stop. And that's why some people who've been self-employed for a long time, and what I mean by that is, you know, writers, artists, people, who we often think of who have more, we think of them in the creative industries, okay? You know, they're painting forever or they're writing books forever. You know, no one's telling them they have to stop. You know, this whole idea of retirement was created at a time when people didn't live to be 70, so the whole idea of retiring at 65 or whatever, 62, that's just a man-made, person-made, created timeline. And now people are living well into their 80s. My father's going to be 95 next month, and my mom lived to be 93 and died 2 years ago. So, again, these are kind of man-made constructs that really don't make sense anymore. So I always say if you can continue doing what you want to do and no one's going to tell you to stop, and you like it, then you keep doing it. If it's one of these things where you can't wait until it ends, then it's really good to think about what's next. Now, what's next? It could be volunteer, could be part-time, or it could be another encore career.
You know, I think that's the thing that's changed in retirement. We used to help people get to retirement, and I think we did people a disservice at times by helping them get to retirement, because many of us should never retire. However, becoming job optional is something that everyone should get to. That's why we titled our book Job Optional, because that's what we're helping people to achieve. If you're job optional, that means you no longer have to work. And if you're job optional, that means that you can make an even bigger impact than with the work that you're doing every single day, because you're not doing it for the wrong reasons. You're not doing it for the money. Now you're truly doing it 100% because it's your purpose, it's what drives you, and it's what makes a bigger impact in the world. So that's why I love what she had to say there, and that's what Job Optional is all about. Now, Dr. Jan Freed wasn't in love with our tagline, Retire with Purpose. She liked the concept of continuing with purpose, and I'll have her here explain to you why.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's now what? What's next? And so, retire with purpose, I would say, I would reword that and say, continue to live with purpose. Okay? Because again, retire in our mind, it usually means put away, expired, whatever. And we're not retiring from life. So I would say continue with purpose. And again, purpose isn't something that you have to know or you can learn. You can, discover, you explore. But like going back to Richard Leiter, what's your reason for getting up in the morning? And if you have no reason, it's easy to get depressed. It's easy to get depressed and feel, like you don't have value. And so it doesn't have to be a big P in purpose. It can be a little p, and it can grow. The size of the P in purpose can grow.
Now, Dr. Freed here, I think she got it a little twisted. Now, retire with purpose means that we're retiring with purpose. We're not retiring and then finding our purpose. That's what that tagline truly means. And I believe if you are job optional, you don't need to work anymore, and you're following your dreams, which might also be your career, then you are retired, but you've retired with purpose. And unfortunately, what Dr. Freed says is a lot of people don't put as much effort into that retirement transition as they do many of the other transitions that we all go through throughout our entire lives. And I'll have her explain to you here why we need to put even more effort into the retirement transition than we do some of those other transitions we go through out life.
One of the taglines that I often use is, if you are what you do and you don't do it anymore, then who are you? And so I often say that people need to really think about the next phase, because we may be leaving a career or a position, but we're not retiring from life. If you just look at the word retire, what does it mean? Like retire bonds, it kind of means put away, put on a shelf, the time is expired. Well, we're not retiring from life. And so we really, every other phase of our life, another example I often use is I say, if you've got kids, you don't plan for where they're going to go to college their senior year in high school. Okay. Or even little kids. I mean, sometimes, they I've got a son in San Francisco, and his main mentor, she's now trying to get her son into preschool. I think it was preschool. No, it was elementary school. And she said she went to Stanford for her MBA, and she said it was harder to get her kid into the preschool that she wanted than for her to get into Stanford for an MBA. So again, my point is, we're so used to planning every phase of our life, but few people put that much thought into the next phase after career.
Well, maybe few people have, but Casey certainly has. And you can learn more about his thinking on how to prepare yourself for becoming job optional if you're one of the next 10 callers, because Casey's offering a copy of his book, Job Optional, at no cost to you. It gives you the financial courage and understanding so that you can take the money you've already earned and use that to create a legacy that you can start living today. So be one of the next 10 callers at 866-482-9559 to receive a copy of Casey's book, Job Optional, with no obligation. All right, we're back in just a minute, and Casey's joined by his partner, Marshall Johnson. Stay tuned.
Hi, Casey Weed, president of Howard Bailey Financial. Planning for a secure and independent retirement requires staying on top of the latest trends. New retirement regulations, trillion-dollar stimulus packages, and a pivotal election year all need to be taken into consideration. The Howard Bailey team is here to support you. We develop retirement plans driven by meaning and purpose, so you can stop worrying about what's next and focus on what means the most to you today. Call now for a complimentary consultation and a customized plan of action. Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, and now we are joined by my good friend, also a financial planner, not to mention quite the rock star. We have Marshall Johnson joining us now, and he joins me every single Friday for our special editions of the podcast, which are releases of our weekend reading for retirees. One spotlighted article out of the 4 that we send you every single Friday. We do a bunch of research, sift through all the garbage that's out there on the internet, and provide 4 articles with commentary from ourselves, all designed to help you make better decisions in retirement. You can sign up to receive that at retirewithpurpose.com. First name and email will get you started. And while you're there, I encourage you to check out the podcast, in particular, episode number 156, where we cover one of those 4 articles from MarketWatch titled, "These Boomers Just Made Massive Retirement Mistakes. Don't Be One of Them." So Marshall, why did we choose this article?
Yeah, this is a great article. First of all, it references an 80s rock song by Pat Benatar, so that's a good start to an article. But it talks about something very important in a year like 2020, when we had a lot of stock volatility. People tend to get confused. You know, when the market drops 30%, you get a little confused. And people tend to make mistakes when they're confused. So this illustrates a couple of mistakes that we don't want to see replicated.
Well, and what really caught my eye was the song in particular that was noted there, "Love is a Battlefield."
Love is a battlefield.
And they continued with "Retirement is a minefield." Yeah. And boy, it is. You know, it's quite a bit different retirement planning rather than accumulation planning. On your way to retirement, you're just trying to make as much as you possibly can so that someday you have enough. You step into retirement, and there's some mines that you need to look out for. There's some risks that you're going to face that need to be addressed. And what I decided to do was get out there and look into minefield operations.
Like how to clear a minefield,
yeah,
right?
that the UN actually puts out. So United Nations puts out their 5 pillars of mine action.
All right.
And I saw those 5 pillars as lining up really well with the financial planning process and the framework that we use for the families that we work with. Number 1 on that list is clearance. That means that we're going to map the risks and clear a path.
Right.
And in our financial planning process, we have a map of those risks. That is the framework that we use. And everyone's going to face different unique risks, but the same basic risks. And that is, you will have emergencies, you'll face market downturns, you'll have inflation impact your spending needs. You'll also eventually have rising taxes in the future. In all likelihood, you'll pass assets on to your loved ones. And so we want to make sure we're hitting every single one of those major risks so that we can clear them and we no longer have to think about them and we can move on in life.
Well, and talking about purpose too, like what's the purpose of retirement? What are you trying to accomplish? For us, that's laying out the path, right? This is the path that we want to go to. We want to retire and we want to go here. And then we look at that minefield and just try to clear those risks one by one.
Yeah, and number 2 is mine risk evaluation, which really means education in the definition that the UN's put out there. And that means that we want to spend some time educating on what those risks are, but more importantly, how they apply to your own unique situation, because they're going to impact everyone differently.
Yeah, everybody's got different challenges. Some people may have issues with legacy, and some people may want to leave everything behind, and others don't want to leave anything to the kids. So we've all got different goals, different strategies. So understanding what risks are present for you in your life and how to best address them.
And number 3 is victim assistance on the minefield clearance operations for the UN. And that really is assistance. And it's naming all the resources you would have to assist you.
Right.
And you have a lot of resources available to you as you step into retirement. You know, over the years, you've probably picked up an estate planning attorney, maybe a CPA, and now you want a quarterback to bring in the financial aspects and bring everybody together so that you're all on the same page. And that is your financial planning team. I myself like to get together with my financial planner along with my CPA and estate planning attorney every single year, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, and we have all of our bases covered.
Well, it's like Woodrow Wilson once said, I not only use all the brains I have, but all the brains I can borrow, right? You want to have a good team. 2 heads are better than 1. So we want to make sure that we've got a good resource, because people see things differently, and we want to have that team available to help through retirement.
And the number 4 step here is advocacy, which is really about monitoring and reviewing. It's that ongoing work that has to happen. The problem, I think, with calling a financial plan is it feels like we're done.
Yeah, it's
we
over.
put the plan together and we don't have to look back. But the reality is that life is going to continue to happen, and there needs to be a framework to make those changes. And that's why we call our planning process a framework, because it's something we're going to continue to revisit and update and make adjustments, and it'll help us make really good decisions as we move along in life.
I mean, just look at the year we had. We had changes with tax law. We had changes in administration. We're going to always deal with these changes. So you have to constantly monitor, constantly review your situation. You don't just make a plan once, right? You got to get back to it each and every year.
Yeah, well, number 5 is stockpile destruction, and to me, that means
you got to blow some things up every once in a while.
I don't want to think about what's going on in the stock market on a daily basis. You know, if you're sitting there and you're watching CNBC every single day and it gives you a little heartburn, then that means you have a problem. That means you don't have a framework in place so that you can let go of those things and pay attention to where life's actually happening, which is right here and right now.
Be in the present moment. Don't be looking through the rearview mirror, right?
Well, really this article was, back to the article, it was all about 2 60-something individuals. It was the tale of 2 individuals, and we've heard this story many times over the years. 2 60-something boomers. One was an ophthalmologist, one was a contractor, and they both made polar opposite errors.
Yeah, the ophthalmologist had too much stock going into 2020. The market dropped 32% back in March, and he panicked and sold and found himself with no stock, and then the stock market recovered.
Sold at the bottom. They both sold at the bottom here. One sold at the bottom back in March of 2009. The other one sold at the bottom of March of 2020. And now, not only did they make one decision on to get out of the market, now they have to figure out when they're going to get back into the market, and they've missed out on a lot of opportunity along the way.
Yeah, the gentleman that sold in March of 2009, I mean, he's been sitting in cash, very low yield, safely losing to inflation for 10 plus years. That's not a plan, Casey.
Well, I've got to say, I bet what happened if they did have a financial advisor is they called that financial advisor and he or she said, hey, just sit on your hands, it'll come back. That didn't feel real good. So they said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm getting out. You should check out our episode that we did on the podcast called Sacrifice Throws. There's always something to do, and you should take action if you have the urge to take action so that you can sleep better at night.
Yeah, obviously, you know, taking action doesn't mean selling all your stocks or getting totally out of the stock market. Having a plan that you can handle that volatility is important in retirement.
And if you feel like that's you don't have that plan, and you'd like to get a framework in place, then I encourage you to give us a call right now or email us at the number on your screen to claim a complimentary copy of my Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Job Optional. We will walk you through the entire framework, give you the ability, the education, what you need in order to have that best retirement and really ultimately find that job optional status that we all covet. I encourage you to stick around because in just a moment, we're going to be covering topics such as fixed annuities. We also have someone coming to us with a question about that second act and how to design that second act in retirement.
Hi, Casey Weed, president of Howard Bailey Financial. Planning for a secure and independent retirement requires staying on top of the latest trends. New retirement regulations, trillion-dollar stimulus packages, and a pivotal election year all need to be taken into consideration. The Howard Bailey team is here to support you. We develop retirement plans driven by meaning and purpose, so you can stop worrying about what's next and focus on what means the most to you today. Call now for a complimentary consultation and a customized plan of action.
We've got some great questions here today from all of you guys to ask Casey, and it's easier than ever. Just go to retirewithpurpose.com, look down on the lower right corner of the page, and you'll find a place where you can drop your question, and it'll get right to Casey. And Jenny in Fort Wayne checked in with a question about the current trend of working longer.
How do you think the current trend of working longer affects the way people approach planning for their own retirement security?
Well, Jenny, I think first and foremost, I think it's good and bad. I think the downside of this is individuals say to themselves, I'm not ready to retire, so they postpone that planning. I've seen this many times with individuals that are still working in their 60s, 65, 70. They'll say, well, I never plan to retire. Really love what I do, so why would I go meet a retirement planner if I'm not going to retire? And that is why we titled the book Job Optional, because it's not about that traditional idea of retirement that we get to this point in time, we turn 65, we get on Medicare, we get on Social Security, and now we ride off into the sunset and we move on. Now, if we retire at 65, we're easily going to have on average 20 years left, and we may have 20 good years left and live 30 years, and that means that's a lot of time for us to continue to make a bigger and a bigger impact in the world. And again, that's why we titled our book Job Optional, because it's all about reaching that job optional status so that we can make an even bigger impact in the world. So my fear is people work longer, they postpone planning for retirement for an even longer period of time, when really this is a massive opportunity to get ahead of the game. Those individuals we meet with that are 10, 20 years out from retirement, the impact that we can make in their life is 10x those individuals that we meet that have just stepped into retirement or are only a couple years out from retirement. I had a couple guys I was playing golf with one time, two physicians that said, what do you do? And I explained that we work with a lot of retirees transitioning in retirement. And he said, well, shouldn't they have already done their retirement planning if they're already there? I said, yeah, they should have. Unfortunately, most don't do their retirement planning until they go, oh, I'm going to retire this year.
Yeah, well, don't make that mistake, huh? Let's get our next question from Jared in Granger.
If I invest $100,000 in a fixed annuity, how much actually goes into the annuity after the upfront charges?
Well, Jared, I was happy to bring you on because it's just a tee-up question you've got for me here. It's $100,000. With a fixed annuity or a fixed indexed annuity, there aren't upfront charges like you would find with a mutual fund A-share. I think that's probably what you're thinking about. With a mutual fund A-share, this was kind of the mainstay of the financial world for decades. Through the 80s and 90s, mutual funds, even in the 2000s, early 2000s, it was all about mutual funds. You went to a financial advisor, they sold you a mutual fund, they had a big upfront commission, they would get 4, 5, 6%, typically 5.25%. So if you put $100,000 in there, they get their $5,000. You end up with $95,000 that's working for you. In the investment world, that's changed dramatically. Very few advisors are still selling A-shares, especially with the advent of ETFs today, low-cost index funds. Investing has become much less expensive. With a fixed annuity, a fixed indexed annuity, there aren't those upfront charges. So with a fixed annuity today, let's say you're getting a fixed guaranteed rate of 3% for 5 years. If you put $100,000 in there, you're going to make $3,000 that first year. You're going to get your 3%. There's nothing taking off of your principal up front. The advisor did get paid. They got paid from the insurance company. They didn't get paid directly out of your $100,000 bucket.
So Casey, Patricia up in Niles, Michigan, says she's sort of retired right now, and she writes, I want to work part-time in a different capacity than I was working for most of my career. How do I get direction as to which way to go at this time in my life? She says she feels very lost.
Well, we recently had a conversation on the podcast with one of our guests that talked about thinking about your values like a wheel. And I think this was a helpful conversation for figuring out how we structure our life and our second act. When we have achieved that job optional position, we can truly architect our future. And I think it starts with identifying your values. And I think it's a fun question to ask anyone that you run into. Say you run into a cocktail party, you ask somebody, hey, what are your values? Might seem like a heavy question for a cocktail party, but if they can answer that, then that means that's somebody I want to hang out with because they have a good idea and grasp on their future. They're living their best life. And for me, if I think about my values, it's personal growth, it's family, it's finances, it's my health, and my days, my weeks, and my years are all structured around that. My career is all structured around those things that really make me feel full. And if you think about those values as a wheel, if you're not doing real good in one of those areas, maybe it's spirituality for you. If that's not going real well, but you're crushing it in all the other areas, how's that wheel turn? It's a little clunky, right? And so we want to create that balance by making sure we're always checking back into those values. One of my favorite guests on the podcast of all time, Carrie Oberbrunner. He wrote a book and he runs an organization called Igniting Souls. He's actually written a number of different books. He was a pastor for 12 years and now he is a business coach, a consultant, an author, coaches people into their second acts. He's done some amazing things as he's transitioned into the business world from the world of being a pastor, and he talks about an ignited soul. And to him, an ignited soul is made up of three things. Number one, who am I? And I think that's where you start. Who are you? Who am I? And that can come out of those values that are really derived from the experiences you've had throughout your life. And then next you go, why? What is my purpose? And what gives life meaning for me? And then next you ask yourself where you are. And quite often, if you've defined your identity and who you are and what drives you, the why that drives you every single day, then you often find out that the where is not where it's supposed to be. You're in the wrong place and you need to make a change in your life. I want you to become an ignited soul. Check out that interview. Check out Carrie Oberbrunner, and best of luck to you in this new act.
And I also hope you'll check out Casey's book. He's offering it to you at no cost if you're one of the next 10 callers. It's called Job Optional. It's been on the Wall Street Journal and some other bestsellers lists, and it's all about helping you get the financial confidence so you can step away from the workaday world and live that fulfilled life that Casey just talked about. Start living a legacy today. You can do it if you follow the steps in Job Optional, and it's available to the next 10 callers at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559 for Casey's best-selling book, Job Optional. It's all the time we have today. We'll see you next week here on Retire with Purpose.
Hi, Casey Weed, president of Howard Bailey Financial. Planning for a secure and independent retirement requires staying on top of the latest trends. New retirement regulations, trillion-dollar stimulus packages, and a pivotal election year all need to be taken into consideration. The Howard Bailey team is here to support you. We develop retirement plans driven by meaning and purpose, so you can stop worrying about what's next and focus on what means the most to you today. Call now for a complimentary consultation and a customized plan of action.